Hi, this is Rhys. I just wanted to let you know that Jesse is ill. So we didn't have time to record some new episodes while he recovers. Get well soon, Jesse. Feel free to leave speak pipes with get well soon, Jesse messages. If you're busy, don't worry about it. It'd be fine. But I wanted to do, but as a backup, I wanted to do a solo episode, which I don't normally do and I don't like doing, but there's something that's been on my mind a lot around Alberta separatism and my own personal experiences with Brexit, which is, directly related to why I live in Canada now and why I'm making content for Canadians like yourselves. Other countries can listen, but I mean, the clue's in the title. So join me on an adventure through Brexit as we talk about the warning signs of Alberta separation and the potential nightmare scenario of this fringe group blowing up in a way that our leaders can barely comprehend.
What makes Canada boring?
Have you ever seen the flag? It's a leaf.
£1 million to go to Canada.
Canada is boring.
I was actually shocked. I mean, from all the countries they could choose from.
Do you like maple syrup?
No, I don't. These Canadians ain't got a care in the world.
Get my country's name out of your fucking mouth.
I was like, oh, he's in Canada. All right. Okay, communist.
The country needs you. I'm Canadian.
But don't feel bad for Canada. Believe me, this is their strategy.
I'll tell you another thing, that beer sucks.
Don't run off to Canada. It's so boring there.
On the morning of June 24th, 2016, I was still living in Wales, in the UK, in what was still part of the European Union at the time. And I remember that day vividly because I was in a very bad mood. And some of my colleagues were literally crying at their desks. I didn't eat anything. I didn't get anything done. The whole country, or at least half of the people in the country, were experiencing probably one of the biggest political hangovers of their lifetime. And I was incredibly sad because the night before, Britain had voted to leave the European Union.
The dawn is breaking on an independent, united kingdom.
This is now likely to go down in history as the most volatile day of trading for sterling in modern record.
And Sky News is projecting that the UK has voted out. The UK...
And the reason it hit so badly is that no one expected it. Nobody really thought it was actually going to happen. A lot of the polls didn't get it right. None of the leaders, none of the commentators. But there was this grassroots groundswell that nobody saw come in that took everyone by surprise and totally challenged the narrative that we've been following the whole time. And a lot of that stemmed from the fact that the Brexit movement was this weird fringe part of the kind of far right of British politics.
But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination.
David Cameron, the Prime Minister himself, called that part of the Conservative Party Loonies and Fruitcakes. But what many didn't perceive is with the growth of social media, misinformation, disinformation, this crankish fringe had actually grown in influence and had invigorated a block of voters to really turn out in force and vote for something that they felt was going to change their lives for the better.
The total number of votes cast in favour of leave was 82,000.
Whatever the result, the Conservative Party will unite behind David Cameron and we will continue to govern the country.
Frankly, to be lectured by the Labour Party, which lost almost every single seat in Scotland, I don't think they're really qualified. I think it did come from a source in London who obviously knows nothing about the campaign on the ground here.
And that's one of the hardest things about Brexit is that the idea that this fringe could win was kind of ridiculous. It's the kind of thing that most, sensible people would kind of roll their eyes over and hopefully kind of change the subject so they can carry on, sharing a family meal without having to go down any more rabbit holes. But one of the things we have to be aware of is not allowing a smug consensus to drown out the idea that a fringe group can remain fringe forever. And that's really why Brexit matters when we talk about Alberta separatism. Because, Alberta isn't Britain. There are similarities. There's a common language. There's a lot of things named after places in the UK. Alberta has giant pickup trucks, whereas the UK seems to have a lot of small, cheap Chinese EVs instead. But if you consider Britain as one voice in a much bigger union, where a fair chunk of the population didn't see itself represented in the conversations, policies, and priorities of that institution, Alberta and the UK definitely have a similarity. One was an imperial island losing its mind over Europe and these crazy Europeans with their pro-consumer policies and a progressive social mindset. And the other is, a Western Canadian province that has a long grievance with Ottawa and doesn't necessarily see the leaders it elects having the influence they want in the seat of power. Energy policy, equalization, and the feeling that central Canada takes its wealth and doesn't appreciate what it's got. That pattern to me is very familiar.
Our entire trade negotiating policy is consecrated, is handed over to the EU Commission, where only 3.6% of the officials actually come from our country. And it is no wonder that they have not been, as Andrea rightly said.
So I hope you can understand why I see that pattern as familiar. Now, the UK had always been Eurosceptic.
May we have 2 eggs mayonnaises, please? Certainly. Why not? Why not indeed? We are all friends now, eh?
A prawn cocktail.
All in the market together. Old differences forgotten, and no need at all to mention the war.
Like Canadians make fun of each other's provinces, there was always like a healthy bit of banter. British people would call the French frogs, and the French would call British people le roast beefs because of roast beef. I remember my grandmother giving Germans a good ribbon while on vacation in Spain because she had a long memory and quite a vivid understanding of what happened in the 1940s. But, at the end of the day, we all sat around the same pool sunbathing, but she needed to kind of let them know that she didn't forget what happened.
I'm voting Leave because I think that the British people ought to elect politicians that they can hold to account that make all their laws.
I want out of the EU so we govern ourselves, control our borders and trade with the world again and not be stuck in a declining trade bloc.
I'm not so much voting for Britain to leave the EU, I'm voting to split up the European Union. It's a very powerful...
For some, the EU was much more serious. They saw it as taking away the power of a once great empire and forcing them to fit into a European system. And that loss of control unnerved a fair chunk of the population. And so the movement began as a fringe obsession. The mainstream laughed at it because there was a lot of prosperity, there was a lot of benefits to being in the EU. So, you could work, travel, get healthcare in like 27 countries, all with nice travel opportunities and pretty good healthcare. Additionally, you could apply for jobs there. The borders were open. An EU passport is an incredible privilege and one that me and my wife took huge advantage of. I used to go and do work in Germany quite often, filming videos for Aston Martin at the Nürburgring without needing like permits, without needing any kind of visas to do that work. We could just drive there, turn up and film. And honestly, it was great. But despite being one of the richest countries in the world, there is a lot of inequality in the UK. And the perception that is a rich country, is true. There, if you look at it in economic terms, there's a lot of money in the UK. But there is a huge underclass of people who have limited opportunity, who have seen living standards drop massively. Child poverty is a huge issue. There are whole regions in the UK where your postcode really decides your outcomes in life in terms of how long you live, your health, and also the opportunities that you get. And what this fringe group started to do in the UK's very dominant right-wing media ecosystem was see a lot of the ills in society be pinned on this relationship with Europe and this position in Europe. And that certainly echoes with a lot of the separatists' argument. They say an Alberta can thrive without having the overbearing, watchful eye of Ottawa taking their stuff and not letting them achieve their full potential. It's precisely the argument that's being made. And when living standards are dropping and when it feels like everything is more expensive and pay it doesn't go up, it's very easy to wield those grievances and create this idea of a narrative where there is one very simple solution to all your problems. And I watched this happen with my neighbors. I watched this happen with family. I watched this happen where over a period of years, thanks to repetition on social media, thanks to repetition in newspapers like the Daily Mail, the Express, we saw more and more that people's complaints about the National Health Service being overburdened, about the negative aspects of immigration, about economic complaints, all of these were bundled together and very emotionally packed up to blame the European Union and Britain's lack of sovereignty as a cause of all these ills.
I think that the country is in really a state of shock. I don't really genuinely believe most people expected.
So as this was developing, the political class and the media class, which I considered myself at the time, I was one of that smug layer of people who worked in the media. I was doing a lot of BBC work at the time, who kind of laughed at this Fringe as no one's going to fall for this. This is ridiculous. But we were kind of naive and stupid, and we were all looking at it from a position of people with university degrees and, comfortable middle class lifestyles. And that had blinded us to this overwhelming grassroots growth that was bubbling away, that wasn't necessarily a voice that had been heard, but were seeing these messages resonate with. And they weren't the people you'd see talking on the news or the radio, and they weren't the people you'd see who were given the limelight or the attention to explain why they felt that way. But they were the people you'd see ranting on Facebook, or who would lean over the bar and talk to you in a pub for hours and hours about all the issues they had. And it's so important that the Canadian media and the Canadian political class don't fall into the same trap and learn those lessons.
If you love learning about all of Canada's weird shit and want to support Rhys and Jesse, say hi or learn more, then visit CanadaIsBoring.com. Leave us a voicemail, watch our YouTube videos, connect to their social media accounts, buy our merch, all in one place. That's CanadaIsBoring.com. Enjoying this story? Falling in love with Jesse's rants? Concerned Rhys is losing his accent? Then help grow Canada is Boring by massaging the algorithm with your beefy pipe fitter hands. Leave us a show review on Apple, an episode comment on Spotify, or leap over to YouTube and subscribe. Every little action means a whole lot to these attention-starved, loud mouths. So please help them continue to live this delusion. Otherwise, Jesse will fall off the rails and Rhys will finally crash his Mustang into Halifax Harbor.
This PSA was brought to you by the Canadian Association of Seriously Self-Deluded Podcasters, or CanASP. Visit CanadaIsBoring.com to learn more.
And one of the things that will really push the Alberta separatism would be the finding of a charismatic leader who can carry the movement and take it to a level that nobody would expect it to. And that is one of the things with Brexit, is that they had that charismatic leader in Nigel Farage.
Isn't it funny? When I came here 17 years ago and I said that I wanted to lead a campaign to get Britain to leave the European Union, you all laughed at me. Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you? And the reason you're so upset...
And to understand Nigel Farage's appeal is not difficult. Despite being incredibly privileged, incredibly rich, and someone who lived at the top end of society, he was also someone who would often be photographed smoking a cigarette, drinking a pint of beer in a pub, comfortable in any pub in any corner of the UK, just chatting with the lads and quite comfortable with his opinions. He was a very good speaker. He was very good at taking headlines and incidents and pulling them into this greater theme. And even today, he still has a huge influence on politics in the UK. He has his own TV show now.
We'd probably need a Doge for every single county council in England.
Like
just
Elon Musk's
looking.
slashing bureau.
Yeah, I mean, quite why Lancashire County Council spent £500,000 on ergonomic chairs for their staff, I don't know.
After Britain left the EU, Nigel Farage sat in the European Parliament for the last time.
So this is it, the final chapter, the end of the road. A 47-year political experiment that the British, frankly, have never been very happy with. My mother and father signed up to a common market, not to a political union, not to flags, anthems, presidents, and now you even want your own army. For me, it's been 27 years of campaigning and over 20 years here.
And in this moment, you can all imagine that this is kind of the ultimate wet dream of Alberta separatists. To be able to slam the divorce papers down in front of their ex-partner and really rub their nose in it.
I know you want to ban our national flags, but we're going to wave you goodbye.
If you disobey the rules, you get cut off. Could we please remove the flags?
And Nigel Farage managed to wield all that negative energy into almost like making the Brexit campaign all about positivity. He called the Remain camp, which is what, the people who wanted to stay in the EU became known as Project Fear. And the idea being, he angled it that they wanted to keep you afraid. They wanted to keep you, submissive to the EU, whereas, the Leave campaign was all about hope and optimism, and we can do this. And that message seemed to really work and connect with his support base. But at the time, I felt like I was living in a totally different reality. I felt the whole Project Fear thing was laughable, and I felt like the most sensible, educated, and experienced people were making incredibly good points based on data and information that this was a terrible idea. But what do I know? And that's the thing. Brexit was not really about Europe. It was about mood, resentment, humiliation, anger, nostalgia, anti-elite theatre, intoxicating promise. And Farage began to embody that. And he embodied it so much that he was able to make people vote against their own interests willingly and happily. And even today, they probably won't admit it. I'll give you an example. The area I lived in the Welsh valleys was economically one of the poorest in Europe. It often ranked against kind of former Soviet countries in terms of GDP and economic activity, and it was because it was very much like the Rust Belt. In the early 90s, the coal mining industry, which had created huge job opportunities and mass employment, the steel industry was the same, all was decimated during the Thatcher years, and all that was left was people and communities that, essentially were built around coal mines, and the coal mines didn't exist anymore. And the EU identified this. They spent millions and millions and millions on schools, on bridges, on roads, on industrial areas, on incentives for businesses to move there from all across the world. They basically poured money into the area, and anything new and shiny there typically had a little label on it with a EU flag. But that area voted overwhelmingly to leave the EU, because even though we were surrounded by all this nice new shiny stuff, and a lot of people's jobs were funded through these incentivizations and EU funding, people just didn't connect those benefits with this new reality that they'd been immersed in, that the EU was this terrible cause of all the worst things in life, and the only reason that life was hard was because of the EU, and the only way to fix it was to leave. And back in 2016, that was kind of a really pivotal moment where I realized that the reality of the community you live in and the physical things there versus what is on your phone or on your TV or in the newspaper you read can have no connection. And if you feel strongly enough, you're able to embrace that digital reality, or the reality that this information has created for you, despite all of the physical evidence around you. It can be weaponized to make you vote and act in a way that totally goes against your own self-interest and the self-interest of your community and the children and the elderly and everyone who's benefited from this mass investment, even on such a hyper-local level. So Alberta separatism is not yet Brexit, but it's exactly the kind of thing that people will make the mistake of dismissing until it becomes harder or impossible to contain. Don't be smug. Don't be like I was, where it was hard to believe. You have to reframe your minds to understand the concerns of people whose lives are hard, to really understand the power and the ability of this narrative to make long-lasting and meaningful change to the institutions, to the government, to the nation, in a way that, seems unbelievable. But trust me, it is not unbelievable. I know. So as of early 2026, separatism remains a minority position, but a meaningful one. So Angus Reid found 29% support for leaving, while a recent poll also put it in like the 20s or low 30s. It's not a majority, but that's a lot of people. And if there was a referendum tomorrow and that energized 30% made sure that they turned out and that everyone they know cared about it turned out, and the 70% of Albertans who are apathetic, this is a fringe issue, this is a joke, this will never get through, take the position that, hey, let's let them get out of this system, you might wake up with as bad a hangover as I had back in June 2016. So you cannot wait for the movement to become dominant, and because that'll be too late. Once you realize there's a chance it could happen, it probably will happen. And if they find their charismatic leader who can soak up all of the attention on the airwaves and really rally people together, that this would seriously need to be contended with. Online misinformation and disinformation is much worse than it was in 2016. And while traditional media has shrunk compared to the role it played in Brexit in the UK, it still matters with a big chunk of the voting base. And those headlines often drive social media too. And I think like the CBC and other Canadian media institutions cannot cover the fringe movement skeptically. And again, I keep using the word smug because I learned a very hard lesson, and so did many others. You cannot be smug about the average Albertan who has a grievance. You have to take the time to understand them, and not in a judgy way. The Brexit movement was colourful, disruptive, it was ratings friendly, it fed rage bait, and the Albertan separatists have the same kind of recipe. They're good television, they grab headlines, and that is seductive for the media because it means extra clicks and better ad revenue. So the media will give these fringe movements way more attention than they deserve, which becomes like a self-sustaining kind of loop where they feed off each other until they just grow and grow and grow. So the media, while they have to kind of take this seriously, they also have to be balanced in terms of how much attention they give it, because it can become obsessive for the news once they realize that people kind of eat this shit up. My advice, my glimmer of hope at the end of all this is very simple. The grievances that people have are legitimate. The pathways they see out of them might be a tangled mess of lies and misinformation, but the only way you can prevent people following those paths is by actually addressing the needs of people. And this is kind of the main reason why these political movements happen, is that our politicians do a terrible job addressing things like affordability, opportunity, education, healthcare. If they did a good job of those things, these movements would stay small and fringe and would never have me making an episode like this. The problem is bad governance, bad policy, and not taking the concerns of real people seriously. So as far as I'm concerned, the only real way to fight separatism is by making sure that Canada's an awesome place to live, and that we need to hold our elected officials to account in a way that makes them do their job and makes them deliver better policy and better outcomes for everyone, especially the people who are struggling, because these things will then go away.
A place that's exciting with kryptonite. You may fall asleep with no warning, because Canada is boring, boring. Because Canada is boring, boring. Canada is boring, so boring. Canada is so fucking boring, boring, boring. A real cool podcast with Rhys and Jesse.